recording and
COC and stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining on our third week of going through the CKA book in the book club. Let's go through some housekeeping items first, as we always do. All right. Carlos, if you wouldn't mind putting the document in the chat, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah. 1 second. I didn't update it, but I'll do it now. Doc, then.
Got it. And I'll share my screen so y'all can see the document.
Oh, that's not it. So we want to do chapter 3 today, right?
Chapter 3, yeah.
Let me second here. So today is, and the year goes fast. October 6th already.
Yeah, time flies.
And I said we made it. I'll take attendance. Don't worry about it. I see Eric is in the airport. The nick container is ICK, and then any news going on? CFP is still open for KubeCon Europe. EU 2024 still open to people. And then KubeCon is next. KubeCon NA 2023 is taking place November 6th, right? On November 1st to 6th?
It's the 6th. Yeah, it starts the co-located events start on the 6th. We also have Cloud Native Rejects on the 4th, on the weekend before KubeCon. It's also in Chicago. I'm gonna put that down.
Nice.
Rejects on the 4th. Yeah, I'm arriving Sunday, so I will not be able to go.
Yeah, no worries. And then the CFP is still open for CVO Navigate, which is going to be in April of 2024 in my hometown, Austin, Texas.
Yes, I saw that. There's a CFP for CVO Navigate. I think they extended to October 8th.
Today.
Didn't extend it. I saw Edging in Twitter posting that they extended one more day.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, I think that's what we have so far for news. I gave a talk. I put the link internal developer platforms, something called DevOps Stage.
Cool.
Page. I show like crossplane, vCluster, Argo on Kubernetes. So that was last night. It was a Ukraine time. What's a Ukraine conference? I was up at 3 a.m. The recording's out. I'll leave the link there. I think that's it. I think we're ready to see some kubectl. And it doesn't matter how people. I cannot say kubectl. It's not in my brain. Maybe it's
me neither.
Panic or something, but it's yeah. But I use the K anyway. Like nobody uses kubectl.
I'm sorry about last week's chat.
But no matter how you say it, we're going to be using a lot of it today.
Oh, go ahead, Sevi. Hi, Sevi.
Hi. Sorry to hear that you shared your terminal last week and we couldn't see. Hope to get this time going.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. Chapter 3 is a big chapter. So
Yeah, I read it and I reviewed some. So I have a few questions on groups specifically, but we'll get there because that's a part that is, at least for me, the most tricky one.
yeah, sounds good. So in this chapter, we'll cover the basics of RBAC, so role-based access control, creating roles and role bindings, using certificates to create new users and groups, creating service accounts with roles, and mounting service accounts to pods. So this session is going to be hopefully a lot less talking, a lot more working in the terminal. Hopefully you can see the terminal on my left-hand side of my screen there. I realized that I wasn't sharing the entire screen last time, so please let me know if you can't see the terminal that is on the left-hand side of the screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Good. So yeah, this covers the portion of the exam that is managing role-based access control and managing highly available Kubernetes clusters. So let's get into it. Role-based access control, a little bit about how that works. The process of gaining access to the cluster, such as with kubectl, uses a kubeconfig to gain authentication to the cluster. Authentication is your initial entry into the cluster, authorization being what you can do once you've gained entry, such as view pods, create pods, delete pods, any resource, whether you can list it, create it, delete it, update, those CRUD operations that we always hear about. So let's get into creating a role. So we talked a little bit about the kubeconfig last week, and I think the week before, so I'm gonna pass over that, but let me know if you do have any questions about the kubeconfig, which is normally located in the .kube directory. If you're using kind, which is the cluster that the dev cluster, the local dev cluster that I suggest in this book, you can do, the kubeconfig actually isn't in the kube directory, so if you do ls on the home directory, I guess. Yeah, so you'll notice that the .kube directory is not in here, or maybe I will in home. Oh, it is, okay, .kube. Yeah, so the config is not in there. So if you see the .kube directory is there, but the config, which we normally see, which is why we call it kubeconfig, it's in the .kube directory, called config. So there's another way to set your kubeconfig, and that's using the kubeconfig environment variable. So if we do env or print env, we'll see kubeconfig right there. So down at the bottom left, you see kubeconfig equals etc kubernetes admin.conf. So if we change directory into etc kubernetes admin.conf, or etc kubernetes, we'll see we have this admin.conf that is essentially the replacement for, or where our current kubeconfig resides. So your kubeconfig can reside anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be in the home directory in the .kube directory. It can be wherever you choose, and you can identify or tell kubectl to point to that kubeconfig by using that kubeconfig environment variable. You can obviously reset that if you'd like, but with the kind cluster, that's the way it's set by default. And I also want to mention one more thing is I always usually exec into my control plane node as opposed to using and installing things on my local machine. That just makes things easier in terms of creating a consistent environment, and also, so I don't have to install anything on my local machine. Yeah, so the etc Kubernetes directory is going to be very important for a lot of things. One is, you can see there's the admin.conf, the controller manager.conf, kubelet.conf, manifest directory, PKI directory, and then schedule.conf. So these are all authentication mechanisms. So these are the certificate and keys that you need to authenticate to the cluster. and for various things, right? So the admin.conf is for kubectl, kubelet.conf is for kubelet, scheduler.conf is for scheduler, and so on and so forth. The manifest directory is also very important, which we'll get to in a second. PKI is also where we, PKI stands for public key infrastructure. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, but it's the client server relationship that we have in Kubernetes. So if we just cat out the admin.conf, what directory are we in? Oh, we're in root directory. So etc Kubernetes again, and then if we cat out the admin.conf, we'll see, whoa, this is crazy. So we just saw a whole thing. Maybe I should pipe that more to do this step by step. So at the top, we have API version v1, which should look very familiar when we're creating our pods and deployments and any resource in Kubernetes. We have this API version, and it's all in YAML. So we have our certificate authority data, which is the certificate authority that is Kubernetes itself. Kubernetes has its own certificate authority, and then we have the server, which is where the server is pointed to, or where the API is exposed on. So in this case, it's on our localhost port 6443, which is very common. And then we have our context. Our context is where are we pointed at in the given time? What cluster are we pointed at? Which cluster and namespace combination? But in this case, since we only have one cluster, we have the cluster, which is the name kind, the user, and the name, current context, the kind, which is the kind of the so when we create pods, right, we have the API version, kind, pod, similar to this spec, we have a kind of config. And then users, which is the kind of the user data, which is the certificate data and key. So it can be in a kind of string format like this, or not a string format. It can be kind of in a raw format, and like this is a base64 encoded key, right? So it can be like this, but also if you do kubectl config view, you also see that this is a shorter version of that very same thing. Just the data is omitted from the certificate authority data, so the CA, the certificate data, and the key data. So this is the abbreviated version of that very same kubeconfig. All right, so yeah, if we echo out kubeconfig, we see that it's pointed at that admin.conf file. Let's
Chad, one second. Can you bring your terminal up a little bit, because at the bottom there's your name is floating on the bottom left.
Oh, okay.
Anything?
Bring it up. Okay, like this.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. Gotcha. Yeah. So now that we know a little bit about the kubeconfig and our authentication, let's move on to the authorization. Authorization in Kubernetes, again, is the role-based access that we were referring to. And it's the combination of a role binding, a role binding, a cluster role, or a cluster role binding, or a combination of each. So let's go through this example of creating a role. So little exam tip here. On the exam, you can utilize the help menu to help you out with specifically creating a role. I would recommend you do that. So I can do kubectl and then create role, and I can pull up the help menu. And so if I scroll to the top of that help menu, there's these examples, which are really helpful for getting to for saving some time, copying and pasting these directly into the terminal. I would recommend you do this during the exam because it's very helpful. So for example, as we look at the book and look at the examples in the terminal, we can see that they're very similar, right? So we can actually kind of match this to what this first example is, which is a role that has 2 verbs, get and list, or 3 verbs, get, list, and watch. And then on the resource, pods and deployments. This one just has pods, but if you need to add additional resources, you can just use comma and then keep appending on those additional resources. So just like on the exam, I would go here and copy and paste right into the terminal, and then I could modify, and you could even use the shorthand versions of the resources. So I could do PO, which stands for pods, and deploy, which stands for deployments. So we want to do get, list, and watch. So we already have that in this example. And then instead of pod reader, pod deploy reader.
And then I think we covered this at the first sessions, setting up autocomplete. I don't know if you have it set up, but auto-completion on the kubectl K command, I should set up on K. Then all these dash verb, dash resource, like you don't make typos or mistakes. You can just quickly get the flags. So that's another tip. Don't struggle with the flags. Just set up autocomplete when you start the exam, and that goes for all the sessions going forward.
Yeah, on the exam it'll be set up for you, so don't stress too much about.
Oh, really? Okay, I think you mentioned that. Yeah, awesome. But don't try to type them. Just remember that you can use tab, and then those flags would autocomplete for you.
Yeah, so use the shorthand where you can, and so I have a little gist that I can share with you if you're following along with your kind cluster, and I'll paste that in the chat so you can copy and paste that into your terminal.
Great. Put it here.
And so I will do that. And so now I can do k get nodes as opposed to kubectl. And then I have autocomplete too. So k get nodes. I'm just pressing the tab key on my keyboard to autocomplete, and it'll fill in the names.
Oh, that's maybe another tip for folks that are new. Auto-completion works both for the flags, but it also works for the name of the object. So for example, you put like node and put the name of the node, it will do a fetch for the nodes and then autocomplete. So it's even better than just flags.
Yeah. Yeah, just to just kind of not wanting to go in a super big tangent about that, but like let's say you create a deployment, right? So okay, create deploy nginx image nginx. So I have this deployment now called nginx. So as we will find out when we go through the next chapter, which is creating deployments, it creates a replica set. So getting ahead of myself a little bit, but just trying to drive home a point about the pod names. So I could have done, all right. So if you have this nginx deployment and you need to, let's say you need to describe it. So describe pod, and then instead of having to type out this entire name or copy and paste or whatever, you can just use autocomplete to complete the name of the pod, which is quite long in most cases. So, and if you use the autocomplete for the namespace, putting the namespace first, that helps with getting the pod names
filter
in namespaces. So
then it's a filter. Yep.
And then, so if I wanted to get kube scheduler, for example, I wouldn't be able to autocomplete that if I didn't include the namespace first.
Yep.
So that's a good
tip.
Yeah, good way to do it, or get in the habit of doing.
Okay, so let's go back to identity. Back to the tangent.
So we get roles in the default namespace, and we see that we have this pod deploy reader. So a role will attach the rules, like we set the verbs get, list, and watch. So get, list, and watch are the verbs that you can do in general. Not sure if there's a better way to explain that, but it's what you can do. It's the action that you can take. It doesn't
the
necessarily
action of the verb, or if you're an HTTP API nerd, it will be a method, an HTTP
Nice.
method. Watch is not an HTTP method, but it's one that it gets implemented through get.
Yes, exactly. So thanks for the assistance on that. I think the point that I wanted to make there is that it's the action. It's not tied to a user, a group, or a service account yet. So the role binding is what you need to create to attach it to that. It's called a subject. So a subject is a user group or a service account. So in this case, we'll go ahead and create the role binding to attach that to a service account, and we'll just attach it to the default service account. So just take notice of the way in which you specify a service account, just namely the namespace that you have to append before the actual name of the service account. It's a little bit confusing here because they're both the same, but this is in the default namespace, which is this first string here, and then the second, the value of the service account. So there's a service account named default and a default namespace, and that's how we identify it. So if we wanted to check out that service account, we could just do k get sa. SA is short for service account, and then we see that default. And then if we do, k get namespaces, we'll see there's a default namespace. So that's just a unique thing with service accounts, because service accounts are namespace resources, so we have to include the namespace. All right, so moving on to this token command here. So this is actually not going to work. And let me tell you why. So I'm just bringing up my notes about this. So pardon, this is not part of the thing. I'm just trying to do some lookup here. So secrets, service accounts for pods. So just bringing up that documentation thing that I bookmarked earlier. All right, so when we create a service account, and not to get too much into the history of things because it's not applicable today, but there used to be a secret rather that was created with a service account. So if I do k create service account, or SA for short, and then let's say name service account web. So k get SA again, and I have the web service account. If I described the service account web, I used to be able to see that there was a mountable secret here, but now there's none. The reason is because the tokens are mounted in a different fashion than they used to be. So they're created with token request API is what I was trying to get at there. So, and not to go too much down this rabbit hole, but token request API is how the token is mounted to the service account, or I'm sorry, the token is created with the service account in order to be mounted to a pod. So by default, this token will be used with each pod, unless you specify otherwise, to interact with the API. You may be asking yourself, why does the pod need to have access to the API? That's a good question, because it doesn't. And I just to give a little shout out to Eric, who has a really good talk on this, and he's ask him about this later on if you want. But Kubernetes Goof is what it's called. Right? Yeah. So here's here's a demo that you can go through on your own if you want to, kind of lock down the secret, or lock down the pod rather, so that the pod doesn't have access to the API. All right, back on track here. Apologies. So yeah, if I run this command, and this is fixed in the book, by the way, but just because this ebook hasn't been updated yet, if I just take this kubectl command real quick and show you that it doesn't work. So I try to this chapter was written before that change took place. So
yeah, do a get secret so people can see what secrets are available or not available. See, there's no secrets. Usually, older versions of Kubernetes, you did a create service account and automatically creates you a secret for kubeconfig. So in newer versions of Kubernetes, that's not true. That's what's happening here. So you have to explicit create a token, a secret.
A secret, yeah. All right, so as a result, the next two commands won't work. Just know that we were going to use that token to curl the API directly, as opposed to using kubectl, and get a result of the API listing of pods and deployments. So we're going to use that in the authorization header, as you can see here. There's a different way to, like I said, it's updated in the book, but there's also a different way that if you want to tackle that on Killer Coda. So I think I can search. All right.
Do you want to just create a secret to continue, or do you want to skip it and move to the next part? Because I'm just checking on time.
Yeah. Let's skip it. Not much to really write home about here in terms of not too amazing. It's just curling the API, and so we can skip that for now. Yeah, I think that's all I need to say about that. All right, so go into a little bit more detail about how these tokens work and how they work in terms of the authentication to the cluster. So I'll let you read that on your own. So I will fast forward a little bit to the let's see. So talking about the manifest directory a little bit. So back, we saw before that there's this admin.conf file that's used as our kubeconfig to gain authentication to the cluster, right? So I said that the etc Kubernetes directory is going to be very important, and it certainly is. And if we go to the etc Kubernetes manifest directory, we'll see that there's these YAML files, and these YAML files, our static pods is what they're called, and the scheduler is not aware of them. So usually, when you create a YAML file, whether it's a pod deployment, whatever, you can use kubectl apply or kubectl create to kind of create that resource. In this case, whatever is in this directory, the etc Kubernetes manifest directory, is automatically picked up by kubelet and then run inside of the cluster. And you'll see the kube API server, controller manager, and scheduler. Those are the same. Those are the manifests, is what we call those YAML files, by the way, that are compromised of the not compromised, but comprised of the pods in the kubesystem namespace. So again, the kubesystem namespace has the system pods. We talked about this last week, right? So we have.
Well, they're in the kubesystem because these YAMLs happen to specify they need to go in kubesystem, but it's because the YAMLs have namespace, the namespace in them, right? If you open one of them,
right. I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is this kube scheduler is the YAML file for this kube scheduler pod right here.
Yes, matching that one. Yep.
Yep. So if I open kube scheduler, for example.
Yeah, this is also for people getting started. At least this part, I found it confusing that people ask like, where can I find the deployment or the replica set or the daemon set for these pods, and they cannot find it in the cluster. Is because there's no deployment, there's no daemon set like normally, right? So they come from the magic of the kubelet and these static files.
Yep. So as you mentioned, because in this YAML file the namespace is set to kube system, that's why they exist in the kube system namespace. So you're right.
You did it via a Vim here or kubectl edit?
This is a VI. kubectl edit actually uses VI.
Yep.
As well.
So question for you: if I do a kubectl edit on any of these pods and I change something on it, then what happens?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So kubectl edit on the pod itself. So if you make a change to these files, whether through Vim or kubectl edit, it will restart the pod that's in that kube system namespace. So be mindful of that. Any change that you make will automatically, or I guess immediately, be
and then the new changes, the new pod will have my changes, or it will have the changes that from the files that are on disk.
You'll have the changes from the files in this directory. That's the Kubernetes manifest directory.
So my answer actually is, if you try to kubectl edit these pods, you will be wasting a whole day editing a pod that it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
That's correct, if you reboot the server, then kubelet would just like use these files.
Yeah. I think that was a curveball. I wasn't expecting that. So yep, that is a trick question. If you modify the pod directly, then it will not matter. It'll always look at this at the Kubernetes manifest directory for the source of truth.
Yep.
So yeah, good point. All right. So Kube API server, going back to the book, is what I'm pointing out here in terms of the going back to the RBAC, and we're looking at the authorization mode here. So if we open up the Kube API server YAML, we'll see the exact match here. So authorization mode, node, and RBAC. On the exam, there may be just node or just RBAC, or maybe there's not an authorization mode. Maybe you need to add one. So that's something to keep in mind for the exam.
What does node means?
Node is there's three modes, right? Node, RBAC, and ABAC. Authorization mode. So if you want to read up on that, there's authorization mode. Yeah, so node authorization is what you're asking about. So node authorization is the special purpose authorization mode that specifically authorizes API requests made by kubelets.
Yep.
So there you go. All right. So the point here I want to make is, you may have to make changes to this API server YAML. If you do that, not edit the pod, but edit the YAML, which Carlos just pointed out. If you edit this YAML in this directory, it will restart the pod. So just be mindful of that. What I like to suggest is,
and if you make typos, and save them, it will try to use it. Yes, that's the best practice. What chat is showing.
Yeah, so I usually make a copy of the YAML first, so that
do you make a copy in the same folder or in a different folder?
You should do it in a different folder.
Yes. Why do I need to do it in a different folder?
Because if I create it in this folder, it'll automatically get picked up by the API. So now there's two, or there's trying to be two API
And then
server.
Kubernetes said, yeah, I guess you want to create two pods of the same name with in the same namespace. Like,
Yep,
great.
exactly. So let's see. Yeah, so let's see what that did. Just for funsies.
I think, yeah. One.
Oh, there's still only one.
Yeah, one. Like they're duplicates.
Oh,
Same name, same namespace, right?
yep. Yep. Okay. So yeah, the
So
main
make
thing
sure
is,
you use a different. The thing is, make sure you use it in you create it in a different directory.
Yep.
Yeah, these are things that if you make this type of errors in exam, this time that you lose, right? Trying to debug things that you did on your own. So.
Yep. I definitely did that on purpose to make sure that you drive the point home there. Just kidding. All right. So this is in the book. There's an exam tip. Just it's exactly what we talked about. So, or being that these manifests exist in this directory, that will automatically pick up and run the YAML from that manifest. And another thing to note here is on the exam, remember, you're going to be taking the exam from a jump host. That jump host is not the control plane node, right? So make sure if you're trying to get to that Etsy Kubernetes manifest directory, you're doing SSH and then the name of the node first to actually get onto that node before you go to the manifest directory. There will be an Etsy Kubernetes manifest directory on the jump host.
Really?
So that may be
why they do that.
Yeah, I don't know, but
it's not. Maybe that's feedback we should tell them. I don't think that's useful, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't think so either.
In terms of like learning or the exam, like that's not very useful.
Yeah. So point being, just SSH to your control plane node, and then you'll be all set. All right. So a little bit more explanation about roles and role bindings. So again, the roles and cluster roles are the allowed actions. Roles are namespace. Cluster roles are cluster wide, and same thing for the role bindings and cluster role bindings, which associate that role to a subject. The role bindings being in a namespace and cluster role bindings being cluster wide.
One point on this chat, if you go to the top, and I think you have a picture afterwards of if like cluster roles can be used in a namespace, right?
Yep.
And
yeah, let me scroll down to that. So it's a little bit further down here. So right here.
Yeah, this one.
Yep. So this is what you can use with which, because you can attach a cluster role to a role binding. You can attach a role to a role binding. You can attach a cluster role to a cluster role binding, but you cannot, maybe for obvious reasons, attach a role to a cluster role binding. So the roles, again, are the actions. Cluster role binding are binding those actions to a subject, which at the cluster level, you wouldn't want to do that, right? Because this is kind of a crossing boundaries. There's a conflict of of interest here.
Yeah, and cluster roles is a Kubernetes resource that doesn't have a namespace, so it's global to the cluster. And then roles is something that has a namespace. It's a namespace object, and like we said in the first sessions, to check that you can do API-resources, and you will see if it's namespace or not.
Yeah, kubectl, or K for short, API-resources. Those are all of them. It's quite a lot. All right, so scrolling back up a little bit to that other diagram. Yeah, so this is the actions, relating them to the HTTP verbs, which you may or may not be more familiar with. So get, list, and watch, namely being kind of the most confusing in terms of what you can and cannot do. They are associated with the get HTTP verb, but I think Carlos mentioned last week that if you list, like let's say pods, if you give the action list, it won't necessarily allow you to run the kubectl get command. Is that correct, Carlos? What was that?
I said one. No, what I was saying though, there was like some people think that at least for it comes a lot in secrets, that I see that in the field, that people give. You can get the name of the secrets because you may need the name of the secret for something, but not the content of the secret. And they usually configure RBAC with, I'm going to give you a list, but I'm not going to give you get. And actually you can list them and also get the contents inside. So if you only give list, you can get the contents like a get, but you will get all of them and its content. You will not be able to do like a get on a specific object, right? Because HTTP vert get would be blocked. But if you do like this is like HTTP. So to understand this stuff, always play around with kubectl verbose v6 or v10, and you will see like the verbs that are happening on the resource and then slash the resource ID or just the resource, and you get the resources. It's a RESTful API.
Got it. Yeah. On the exam, they will specify get list or watch, so there's not going to be any trick questions there. I think it'll be pretty clear what you need to.
Instructionally clear. Yeah.
Yeah. So no worries. All right. So we'll skip this part because we already created a role.
And one thing is always use the CLI. I don't know if we mentioned that before, but the dry run -o YAML. Never try to create like cluster roles or cluster bindings, like everything from scratch with YAML. Like that's impossible for remember everything and getting all the syntax. So if you can create it with the CLI, go ahead. If there's something that the CLI cannot support, then create enough YAML with the CLI with -o YAML, and then edit the YAML with the small part that is missing.
Yeah, so going back to this, what Carlos is talking about, dry run equals client after the command, of course, and then OYAML to output that to YAML, and then we can do roll.yaml.
Yep.
So now we have roll.yaml. Roll.yaml, we can go in here and change any of these parameters of the role binding, maybe add another subject or modify. All right, so that's exactly kind of what okay, so if we get role and output the YAML of the role, which is the actions. On the exam, by the way, there may be so a lot of times with a question, make sure you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the question, because a lot of times they will include a template for you to use. So they'll say, and you don't have to use it, but they'll say a template has been provided to you in the temp directory and it's named, role, roll.yaml or whatever. So you can open that and then, save some time there because it's already a template that's created for you. And then you can, let's say that it's, asking you to get list and watch. Maybe in the template they leave out. Most likely they'll leave out this whole rule set, and so you can add that in yourself to the template that they provide. All right, so and also like if you need to maybe just see what the YAML will look like, you can just do dry run client OYAML without outputting that to a file, and then it'll show you the YAML without doing anything. So you can even copy and paste directly from here if you want on the exam. So that's an option. All right, so scrolling down a little bit and getting to just a little bit about the API groups and where each of those resources are located in the API. And so if we create a role binding for the pod reader binding, so So pod
Yeah, and
deploy
another thing, if you don't remember the API groups, you can always use the API resources command, like things like secrets, config maps. They don't have a group, so it's an empty string, but they have a version v1. And deployments is something that people tend to get confused, that they think is because it's kind of native. It doesn't have an API group, but it actually has, and it's apps. So the thing is, learn how to fish. Like if you don't know the answer, then know where to look for the answer. So the answer, it's located in K API resources, and then you can see it there.
Yeah, so you'll see that here for the role binding, the API version is rbac.authorization.kbs.io/v1. So that'd be different than, let's say, pods or nodes or deployments.
Config map or config maps, secrets will be empty, right? Empty string. That's where people get confused.
Mm-hmm. All right, so if we create a role binding, I think we already did that. Yeah, pod deploy reader. So if we create a role binding and get the role binding and output the YAML, this is what that will look like. We already just showed that, so I'll move on. So I want to really emphasize this auth CanI tool. So this is really useful for checking your work. So let's say you create a role and a role binding, and you want to see that those actions are taking effect. You can use auth CanI, and it's used in this manner here. So let's just pull up the help menu to show that there's examples too. So auth CanI create pods in all namespaces, and this is using your kubeconfig to do this, by the way. Or if you skip down to a couple lines down in the help menu, you can do -- as, and you can do it as the subject that you just made that role binding for, or that user or that group or that service account. So being that I created that role binding that's associated with that default service account, I can do, and I can copy and paste directly from here. So I will do that. And so kubectl auth CanI list pods as system service account, and then the namespace again, default, and then default, and the namespace default. Yeah, so this is not using our kube config, so it's not using the existing user that we're kind of using right now. It's using, it's using the authentication that the service account would use. And then we get back a direct response. So this response in this case was yes. Yes, we can list pods as that service account. So that's a good tool to use to check your work if you're unsure, or you it's pretty easy to use. So you can use that on the exam to make sure that you have.
I just noted that there's a -- there's a -- group, and you can do a -- UID. Interesting.
Oh, okay, cool. Yep. So I would emphasize, I would practice that a lot before the exam, and so you're comfortable with using that. And there's a ton of examples, not a ton. There's a few examples in the help menu here that's kind of listed in the book as well. All right, so we can do this on the service account as we just did, or we can do it as users. And so if you noticed when I pulled up the kubeconfig earlier, or I can do kconfig view, kconfig space view. And so right now I'm kind of I'm preventing myself from saying logged in because it's not true. Just using the current context with the user Kubernetes admin. So I can, if I create a user, for instance, in the book, we use the user as Carol for whatever reason. So you can do different. You can use the auth CanI with different users as well. Is what I'm trying to get at there. All right, so let's fast forward a little bit because we're still pretty low on time. So git cluster role, and all right, so this is a little bit about system roles and groups. So you'll notice if you do kubectl git cluster role and then grep out the system.
There's a typo
Grep out
in
system.
the book. I'll put the command to create the role binding. It's -- user, not user. But don't worry, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
People are following along.
Yeah, the print book should contain the correction. So I think they said the ebook is going to be updated at the end of this month. So apologies for that, but
No, I'm putting that. Yeah, don't worry. I'm putting it in the notes also. So just continue.
All right, so these are the cluster roles, and then I just grepped for system. So these are the cluster roles that are come by default with a kind cluster anyways. And so we have admin, cluster admin, edit, kindnet. These are all system roles. So these are more or less your kind of admin, usually contain admin rights, meaning they can do whatever they want in the cluster. The reason why I point that out in the book is just because you don't want to, obviously you don't want to accidentally, create a role binding that would include one of these groups. But also, I think it's just mindful to be aware that these exist, which are the default.
And for cloud providers, at least cloud providers, I can talk for AWS. Some of these come with the managed Kubernetes: admin, cluster admin, edit, and view. Those ones are like standard ones that you can even find in OpenShift and other ones. And I've seen folks that they try to recreate the view or the admin or the edit, and sometimes they missing information or they add too much information. So the guidance is use one of the built-in ones, and if it doesn't work, then start creating your own role. But the built-in ones are good because then you can use them as in a namespace, for example.
Yeah. So I think let's say on the exam there's a a role binding that you have to bind that the view
Cluster role.
cluster role
Yeah.
to that might be, there might be already one created. So run the kubectl get cluster role and find out before you start to create anything from scratch.
Yep.
All right, let's fast forward a little bit. So this is I'm not going to cover this just because this is a little bit kind of beyond the scope of the exam. I think it's more interesting to know than kind of useful. But yeah, just trying to point out these system authenticated, system unauthenticated, and system masters, which are groups that are also come with the default kind of cluster and kind, at least, and so that may be on the exam as well. So those are groups, right? So groups are kind of a grouping of users that you can assign permissions to as well. All right, so we talked about this exam tip. So some exercises. So create new role named SA creator, and that will allow for creating service accounts. So for this, like if I got a question like this on the exam, I would do create role and then pull up the help menu, go up to the top where I have the examples again. And so I'm looking for one that allows for creating service accounts. So the verb would be create, and then let's see if we have an example here. So pod reader. Okay, let's watch. All right, so we don't have an example that exactly matches that. So I'll just copy and paste one of the examples and then change it. So for the resource, this is going to be service counts, or SA for short, creating service counts. So, and then the verb, I'll do create, and then the named SA creator. So now we have, if we do k get roles, we see the SA creator. If we do k get role OYAML, and it will output both roles. So if I wanted to do just the SA creator, could do that. And then we'll see that the resource is service counts and the verb is create. Next one is create a role binding that is associated with the previous SA creator role named SA creator binding that will bind to the user Sandra. So I'll do k create role binding -h, and hopefully we have an example for that. Scroll up to the examples. All right, so bind to the user. So I'll look for one that has a user. I'll just take this first one here, copy and paste, and then I will delete the group. And then Sandra was the name of the user. I can do multiple users, as you see in the example. And then cluster role. Instead of cluster role, we want to just do role. So we'll delete the cluster part, role, and then SA creator, which was the name of our role. And then the name of it is SA creator binding. Okay, so now if we do k get role binding, we'll see we have the SA creator binding. All right, so those are the exercises. So let's move on to users and groups. So I just kind of went over this a little bit. Users are not really users in Kubernetes, which I think is an important thing to point out. The user is just whatever the common name is in the certificate. So you can make it anything you want. So it could be Carol, it could be Sandra, it could be Chad, it could be Carlos. And then the group is also in the common name of the certificate, which could be developers, as you see in the example here, or it could be whatever group you signify. The point being is that it's just a fictitious name that you make up when you create the certificate.
But it's O, right? It's not CN. So O stands, I think, for organization unit. So CN is usually like the if you're creating one for, like, for example, TLS or a domain like a server, a web server, the CN is usually the host name or the domain name, like carlos.com, and then -O, it could be the organization. I want to say organization unit, but yeah, you can do /O develop. Like if a person belongs to multiple groups, like /O developer, /O East Coast, /O front end, right? They can belong to 3 groups. So you can just start passing /O equals /O equals /O equal.
Yeah, and so I'll scroll down to the example so it's a little bit more clear. So here's the example. You use OpenSSL to create the certificate signing request. And so here's in the common name, so subject equals, and then CN equals Carol, or whatever the user's name is, and then O equals developers, which is the group. All right, so here's kind of the, going through the creating a user. So we generate the private key, the RSA private key, and then we create the. Go ahead.
Let me clarify myself, because I know this for man. So there's /O is organization, and then there's also something called organization unit, which is OU. So I was saying organization unit, and it's just organization, the representation of the group.
Okay, cool.
There's no OU, just a dash O.
Cool. So then we cat out the certificate signing request, and we can base 64 that CSR with the, taking out the new lines. So that's the -WO, which will work on Linux at least. And so this allows us to submit that to the Kubernetes certificate signing, the Kubernetes CSR. So being that Kubernetes has its own certificate authority, it can sign certificates. So we create a certificate signing request. So if we do k get CSR, you'll see that there's already one for kubelet. And so this is the way that you can also create certificates for new users, which we're doing right now.
Yeah, this is an area where if you have a job as a Kubernetes admin, this is an area that you will have hands-on, like in the field. This is used a lot, understanding these aspects of how the certificates get created, how it gets authenticated, how a worker node Kubernetes gets a certificate to be trusted, and then how to get users associated to a group, either with the OIDC or AIM and things. Wanted to highlight that this is for the exam, but it's useful in practice a lot to understand these pieces.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we create the certificate signing request YAML, just like we do with any other resource in Kubernetes, and then we use kubectl apply to create that CSR, and it'll show up just like it did for the on the left-hand side here for the kubelet. And you can go through the process of approving that CSR. So so get CSR, and then simply approve the request by kubectl certificate approve, and then the name of the CSR, in this case it was Carol, and then we see that it's now approved and issued. And so now that it's approved and issued, we can extract the contents of the certificate. So if we kubectl get CSR Carol, which is the name of the CSR, -O, and then just basically use JSON path to take out the certificate from that base64, decode it, and then output that to a file. All right, so now we can use the key and the client certificate to create our new kubeconfig, or add it to our existing kubeconfig. So in this case, we're adding it to our existing kubeconfig, and then we can set our credentials to Carol, and then use the key and certificate to do that. You can optionally use the embed certs if you don't want the super long base64 string there that is included in the certificate that we saw at the beginning of this call. And but yeah, it's optional as in the note here. So so now you'll see the credentials. If you do kubectl config view, you'll see that this is now included along with the Kubernetes admin. You have now an additional user, Carol, and then the client certificate data and the key data are included in that. So now you can set your context to that user and then use the context. kubectl config use context, and you can actually kind of assume that user more or less. So you're operating as the user when you're performing your kubectl commands. This is also in a scenario in Killer Coda. If you'd like to go through more of an interactive way and kind of multiple times, so you can kind of refresh the screen and have this. So you basically can't make any mistakes. So in Killer Coda, there's this scenario which I'll paste in the chat, which you can go through, which does the same exact thing that we just went through in the book. And if I can find the chat, I will. There we go. Okay, so do we want to continue or do we want to end here? Because I just noticed it's 6 after the hour. So
How much do we have left to finish?
so we're at 3.3. Oh, it's the last section. So I guess I'll just wrap it up real quick if people are still hanging in there. So service counts, we created a role and role binding for service account, but this is a little bit more in depth about service accounts. Service accounts are a way of kind of we're programmatically assigning a pod in the example that we used before, but assigning a it's a subject. So we assign a service account to a role binding like we did before. All right, so if we so disregard this, the secret part, we already talked about that. So this is what it looked like before, where it had the mountable secret when you create a service account, no longer has that. And then, so the important is when we scroll down and we start to create our pod. So we can optionally, so let's just do that. So K run nginx image nginx, which is the quickest way to run a pod in my opinion. So now we have this this pod named nginx. So if we exec into it, so K exec it and then nginx, and then just get a shell to it, and then we can cat out var run secrets kubernetes.io service accounts account singular. Oh, it's a directory. What did we do? So yeah, so we can cat out whatever's in that service account directory, which is the actual. All right, so let's just. I should have done a bash.
You're looking for that. You're looking for the token.
Yeah, it's in there, but I'm trying to use the tab key to see what's in that directory. But
But did you enable the annotate? Did you enable the service account to have a kubeconfig token? Because it's not by default.
Yeah. So yeah, I can't use the up arrow. Yeah, so I'm just trying to demonstrate how to get out the token from a running pod, and it's just called token. So there it is. That's what I was trying to do. I was just trying to cat out the token, which is mounted to each pod unless you specify otherwise. So that's what I want to talk about next is the kind of the optional behavior or the non-default behavior that you can implement here, which is to not mount the token to the pod. So if I do my run command again, and let's just name this something different. So we don't have any conflicts. So I'll do a dry run equals client again, o YAML, and then I'll just pod YAML. So if I open this up, so right in the spec here, I can add this annotation to the spec, which says auto mount service account token equals false.
That's not on the pod. That's on the service account.
That's not on the service account. You can do it from both. So yeah, maybe we do the service account first. So let's scroll down a little bit. Sorry. So from the pod, here's the pod. We can do service account name.
Yep.
Here. So that's what I was trying to point out before. So this is, let's say we didn't want to, or actually we created one named web, right? So create a service account, and then, so that's the service account name, and then
below you can put the auto mount service account token equals false.
Yeah,
which I think you have it at the bottom. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, here we go. Yep. So service account name. So that's using a specific service account, and then auto mount service account token false. Yeah. So those are the two things
But you don't have, for folks, you don't have to specify the service account name to be able to use auto mount service account token equals false, right? You can tell it like, it doesn't matter what's the service account name that this pod is going to use. I don't want any container to get the token, basically. You as an admin, right?
Yep. All right, so if I save and quit here, I can do create, let's say, on pod YAML. Okay, get pods, and I see if I exec into that pod again, so exec it nginx2, I'll do a bash shell this time, just for simplicity, and then I can do cat var run where'd it go?
Were you looking for the
right here?
That doesn't work? Autocomplete in there?
It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I thought it would if I did a bash shell, but
yeah, it did bash. Weird.
Yeah, I'm pressing the tab key.
Weird.
But anyways, the point there is that there's no token, so no such file or directory, and so that's how you can check your work there if you're trying to disable the mounting of a token.
And that's a pod property. I'm trying to remember if that's available. Like if you want to let if you have two containers in one pod and you want to let one container mount it and another one you don't want to mount it, if that's possible. But I think that's homework, and you will get that information through the kubectl explain pod.spec, right? This is how you find. This is how you fish for the answers, right? You don't have to memorize anything. Just fish for the answer, and then in here it will tell you if the auto mount field is only available at the pod level, or you can put it inside the container, one of the container arrays items.
Yeah, the explain is very useful for that.
Something that's one of the first things I learned when I started in Kubernetes, or I was starting from the first exam.
Yeah.
And I use it until today, and very useful for the types that come with Kubernetes versus, for example, config map or secret or pod. For things that are additional like CRDs, then you can get that you can get this information through get CRD and get the YAML, or explain, doesn't matter, but two ways to get that information. Sorry.
Yep.
Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, and that's it. So the exercises are, we've already done these actually. So create a service account named secure SA. We created a service account called web, but similar process to do that. And then make sure the token is not exposed to the pod. So that's the example that we went through up here. So in the pod, in the service account YAML, we can add this to not auto mount the service account token. And the other exercise was to create a role, a cluster role rather, and then with those specific actions, and then bind that role to the user. So,
and this one is a create. So it's saying would allow create action on deployment replica sets. I think
that should be replica sets. Yep.
Daemon and demo sets. That does not necessarily means that you want that service account or that user to be able to read them, because you can give someone permission to write but not read, and that's a common scenario in IT when you have like writing to disk or writing logs, right? You want to give access to the thing that writes the logs, but you don't want to give that thing that writes logs access to read somebody else's logs and steal secrets, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a common pattern. I think a common question like that can show in an exam where they ask you like something explicit. Just focus on what they're asking, because if you give more permissions, then you may fail the task, the exam question. Because you can get something working if you give it like create and get. Create works and get works, but they only ask you for create, so they're going to check if you only gave create and didn't give more access that needed. And that's it. that's a skill, right? When you become an administrator of this IT system. So that's also what they're trying to test. So there's logic behind these questions. I'm trying to summarize.
Yeah. So when you go through this exercise, I would encourage you to
Verify.
to use Auth-CANI to do what Carlos exactly said, which is, you check to see if this subject can create replicas or daemon sets, but also you can see can they delete or list their verbs as well. So yeah, they're on with it.
Yep. This is a good exercise that you include this one, Chad, in the book.
Yeah. All right, that's it for me.
Yeah, RBAC, all the